All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome to our virtual event for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Claire, and I'm an event host at Third Place Books in Seattle, Washington. On behalf of the bookstore, I am so pleased to welcome you to tonight's event with Anna E. Collins and Alexandria Bellefleur. We're, of course, celebrating the release of Anna Collins' debut novel, Love at First Sight, and we're so excited to have you here. First of all, I just want to do a couple like housekeeping things. I want to explicitly invite you to join our chat window, which is at the bottom of your screen, just to say hello, tell us where you're from, let us know if you're having a good time or if you're excited to be here. We love to see it. And I don't know, it's just a fun way to interact with people who aren't in the room with us right now. Another thing I just want to also say, through virtual events like tonight, Third Place Books is fortunate to continue fulfilling its mission of connecting readers with authors in community spaces. We, of course, miss having authors in our actual stores, but at the same time, we are so grateful for the miracle of virtual events that bring our event series into your homes all across the world. So thank you for tuning in and supporting independent bookstores. We are so proud to host a number of exciting virtual and in-person events this season. We will be doing more in-person ones as we go along, much smaller ones. But you can find all the information about that on thirdplacebooks.com. And I also encourage you to sign up for our email newsletter. That will also give you updates on the latest author events we have coming up. And also, as I mentioned before, the chat window is at the bottom of your screen. But if you have questions for our authors tonight, because there will be a Q&A portion at the end, go ahead and put those in the Q&A box, which is different from the chat window. So again, the last like 15 minutes of the event will be going through those questions. So if you have things you specifically want to ask the authors, put it in the Q&A box. So without further ado, I'd love to introduce our authors this afternoon. Anna E. Collins is a Seattle area author who writes stories about the lives and loves of women. Once upon a time, she was a teacher, and she has a master's degree in educational psychology. Love at First Bite is her first novel. And one the Library Journal says is a sweet, sexy story of revenge gone wrong, featuring a lush Washington state setting, quirky side characters, and two adorable Great Danes. What's better than that? And then joining Anna in conversation is Alexandria Bellefleur. She's also a Pacific Northwesterner and is the Lambda Literary Award winning author of Hang the Moon, Written in the Stars, and the forthcoming novel Count Your Lucky Stars. So with that, I am so pleased to introduce these authors and be watching along with you tonight. Please join me in welcoming Anna and Alexandria.
Hi, everyone.
Hello.
Well, I am so excited to be here today with you, Anna, to celebrate Love at First
Sight.
I loved it so much. You know that I absolutely adored this book. Do you want to just start off maybe by telling everyone a little bit more about yourself other than your official bio and, you know, telling everyone a little bit about your debut, Love at First Sight?
Sure. Thanks for being here with me. It feels nice to have someone on my side. Yeah, so Love at First Bite is my first published novel. It's my first rom-com. I've written books for 12 years. I think I started when my kids were really little. And yeah, I used to be a teacher a long time ago and in Sweden, where I grew up. And then I've lived in the US for 14 years. And I'm in the Seattle area right now. And writing is what takes up most of my time, I guess. Love at First Bite came about because 2020 was a mess. And I needed to write something lighter, something that wasn't as maybe introspective and deep as some of my women's fiction. So that was what brought it about. And it was kind of an experiment in diving into lighter fiction, not lighter in terms of, you know, literature, but just like a more humorous story. And that's why it's very intentionally a silly story. Very, yeah, it was intended as an escape from what was going on in 2020.
Definitely, yeah. I think a lot of readers are looking for the humor and the joy with the world being what it is today. So for the readers who don't know, can you kind of give a quick elevator pitch about Love at First Bite, what it's about?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, I hope there are some people here who haven't read it yet. It's about Danny. She's an interior designer in Seattle, and she has broken up with her ex, or they were her fiance. He cheated on her a month before the wedding, and it's rubbing her the wrong way that he is kind of moving on with his life, kind of still seeing the realtor that broke them up, and whereas she is crashing on the couch at her cousin's house, and she's feeling the pain of it, and she doesn't feel like he's feeling the pain quite the same way. So she has this idea of buying the small plot of land next to his house to build a structure that's going to mess with him. And, you know, every time he looks out the window, he will know that he did something wrong. And together with her cousin and her new landlady, they kind of set the Project Spite House running. And that is the setup for the book. And then she has to, you know, she's an interior designer, but she needs an architect to drop the plans for the house. And enter Wyatt Montego, who is an architect at the house building firm where she works. And not a person she enjoys being around, but he proves himself to have hidden depths, and romance ensues.
It's fantastic, and it's such a great and unique hook. I mean, Spite House is like, what was your inspiration for the book and for Spite Houses? I think it's a great concept.
I was actually surprised that it hasn't been done, because I think a few years before I wrote the book, I'd read an article about spite houses around the world, because I didn't invite spite houses. It's a real thing, you know. There are several in the US, there are multiple around the world, and they usually come about from a conflict, like a divorce or a feud between siblings over land or something like that, where someone decides that instead of moving on, they're gonna be a thorn in their ex's side or their sibling side or whatever it is. And usually these structures are pretty odd. It can either be like a really colorful house in the middle of a very drab street, or a really narrow house on a small plot or the edge of a property or something like that. And I had made a note of it. I keep a list on my phone where I have ideas for stories to write. So I had jotted down a note. It just said Spite House. Someone builds a house to get back at someone else. That was the note. So that's what started it. When I knew I wanted to write a rom-com, I went through my list and that popped out. So
I love that. I think a lot of us have probably felt that urge for revenge, but to take it so far, to actually build a spite house, to, like, you know, spite someone who's wronged you, I think that's next level. And I love it so much. The little like petty part of me adores that.
And I think that's the beauty of fiction. You can embellish it too. And what I wanted to figure out, because the stories I read about spite houses never had any information about the resolution. You know, what happens after the house is built? Do they reconcile? Do they tear the house down again? Are they actually living next to the person they wanted to spite? So that was where the creative freedom came in. You know, I got to write a story where I could actually wrap it up and show what happens after, or however you want to say it. So there's a little essay, or what you want to say, at the end of the book, right, that talks a little bit about that.
Yeah, I found it so interesting because I had heard of spite houses, but I wasn't familiar with the sheer fact that there were so many. And there's one in the Washington, the Seattle area.
Yeah. I think it's in Mott Lake. Yeah,
I think that's so interesting. I love it. Such a unique hook. So what other research did you do while writing the book? And did you discover anything interesting or surprising that, you know, for drafting?
Well, I think we always joke as writers that if someone looked at our search history when we're writing our books, you know, they might think that we have other professions other than what we're actually doing. For this book particularly, well, obviously Wyatt and Danny are, you know, an architect and an interior designer, which I'm not. So there was research going into that, and a lot of zoning rules for properties in Bellevue where the house takes place. I'm sure I took some creative liberties too, but rules about fencing, you know, how high can a fence be? So it was a lot of research around just properties and the process of building a house. Obviously, again, you have to suspend disbelief a little bit. Even though this is a small house, the timeline I'm aware is maybe, you know, a little bit on the fast side, especially in the economy we're in right now. But trying to think what else. Oh, I was researching how to tuft wool figures. I almost bought a kit on Etsy because it looked really fun. I tend to do that with crafting because that's one of Danny's interests in the book. So I kind of wanted to figure out how that would work. It is my dream one day to have someone read the book who is tufting wool figures and like tuft me one. That would be amazing.
Yeah, I loved the email address.
Right, wool is cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm sure that we have some writers joining us and some readers joining us. So varying degrees of understanding about what the writing process is like. So what was the process like for you from, you know, that glimmer of an idea to actually drafting a book to seeing it on the shelf for the very first time?
I think on the whole, the process was really quick for this book. I wrote it in the spring of 2020, and I usually draft pretty fast, so I think I wrote it in a couple of months. And then for me, I usually let the book sit for a couple months if I can, just to come back at it with fresh eyes. So I think I edited it in the fall. And then, yeah, and the way I usually draft a book is I need to have some of the information about the story beforehand. I usually like to know what the character arc is, who are the characters in the beginning of the book and who are they at the end of the book. So I can figure out kind of what needs to happen to them throughout the journey to change them in the way I want them to change. I'm not so much of a, what they call a pantser, you know, where you kind of start writing and it takes you where it wants to take you. I need to know what direction I'm heading. So I knew who the characters were. Obviously, I wanted it centered around this lighthouse. There was a lot of idea generation for the hijinks they could come up with to make this a terrible structure for her ex, you know, how many ways they could annoy him. Yeah, and then I edited it in the fall, had beta readers, critique partners read it, and then Graydon House bought it, I believe, in February of 2021, and set a pub date of January 4th this year, which was then 11 months out. So it was a really quick turnaround. And then we worked with a team at Graydon House. I worked with them really intensely the first half of this year. And then the past 6 months have kind of been quiet on my end. It's all the work that goes in behind the scenes at Graydon House, and the team has been so amazing there. It's been fun to see. Occasionally I'll get an email with an update of what they're doing behind the scenes. So it's been a real learning experience too.
Definitely.
So that was the journey with that book.
It's always nice when you get like an email and it's like a cover or
right,
good news instead of your revisions.
Yes, for sure.
What would you say like surprised you most on your publication journey, since it was, I mean, I'm sure how short it was, how abbreviated your timeline was. Was there anything else that took you by surprise?
I know that the first big surprise was when I think it went up on NetGalley. I don't think I was quite aware what the process of the actual process of publication was, but for those who aren't writers, it goes up on a site called NetGalley where bloggers and reviewers can request early copies of the book and start reviewing before the book comes out. And I don't think I was prepared for reviews to start popping up. I want to say it was June So 6 months before publication. That was
Really,
startling. I'm of the mind, like, I don't really like to go read my reviews. Occasionally I'll have friends send me good reviews, but I'm not, like, readers are entitled to their opinions, but I can choose not to read the criticism if I don't want to.
That's
But
probably a
so,
healthy approach.
right. I know that you have a different approach to things, but
But I like your method better. I think it's better all around.
yeah, I don't know. That's what works for me. So I wasn't prepared. I think I had to look something up on Goodreads just for something else, like I don't know. I had to click on my Goodreads and I did not expect there to be reviews up. So that took me by surprise. Other than that, I think, the whole machine, what that happens behind the scenes. I specifically asked, my marketing and PR and publicists, they've explained really well to me what they do, and I had no idea what went into their part of this. So that was really interesting to me to find out all the things that they do behind the scenes.
Yeah, it's a lot of moving pieces and
Yeah,
so much work that you never see what goes into it when you're like looking at the finished copy, how many people have a hand in it.
right.
It's a nice feeling.
And I think the other thing was when I got my box of ARCs. The ARCs are the advanced reader copies. So that was during the summer, August maybe. And they actually looked very much like the finished book. It just had another sticker on it. That was also, I did not expect to have a box of my book come out or arrive at my doorstep in August.
It's definitely a special feeling to like hold
Yeah.
your in your hands for the first time, especially
Yeah, it's huge.
working on it for so long. And
Mhm.
I always love watching unboxing videos and seeing that moment when an author is holding something that they poured themselves into. It's
Right,
it's magical.
right.
I want to just remind everyone watching that if you have questions, put them in the Q&A box so that we can get to them at the end. So leave them there instead of the chat amongst yourselves, but Q&A. So your characters are phenomenal. Obviously Wyatt and Danny, and then you have amazing secondary characters. I would say that your secondary characters were some of my favorites in the book. They added so much humor and heart. Of all of your characters, who would you say you identify with most?
Oh, I don't know. I think I try really hard to not like make a character that's me, but I think most of the characters have some aspect of me. I really like Iris's kind of dry wit, kind of sitting back, the little surly, but I don't know that that's me, but I think it's like a quality that I hope I'll have when I'm 70 plus, that I aspire to. I don't think I'm as petty as Danny, but I can also see, yeah, I'm definitely not as petty as Danny. But I would have fun coming up with ideas for how to get back at someone. And I think, some of Wyatt's guardedness I can identify with, maybe more when I was younger. So I think they have, small aspects of my personality, but none of them are really me,
Absolutely. Yeah, I think a lot of authors put little pieces of themselves in
Yeah,
others, but yeah, not like a self-insert situation.
right.
I loved Wyatt so much. Did you want to like talk a little bit more about his character?
Yeah, I can talk about Wyatt. I love Wyatt too. And I'm really, really happy that readers seem to be responding well to him because, he is sort of an unlikable character in the very beginning of the book. And my goal was to make him kind of the grump. I love a grumpy hero. You can tell right away that there's something behind the surface that makes him that way. It's not that he's mean-spirited in any way. And so it makes me really happy when readers love Wyatt. I knew right away that I wanted to have many ears rep in the book. My husband has many ears. And, it's something that he's lived with for, I don't know, 7-8 years now. And it's a condition that many people don't know anything about. And so I wanted him to have a real have gone through some things. Sometimes I can feel that only the main character gets to have the depth of, the deep backstory, but I wanted Wyatt to be a real hero. I wanted him to have flaws. I wanted him to be affected by his past, and I wanted him to have had things to have overcome, but that still lingered, because when you live with a chronic condition, you kind of never know what's going to happen day to day, especially when you go through periods of time when it's harder than others, because a lot of chronic conditions go up and down. So I don't know, for me, the many years was an aspect of his life that informed and how it had affected him in previous relationships, that informed how he were in the present time and how other people saw him, because it was a part of him that he kept really hidden. And I think that when you have big secrets like that and you have your guards up, people around you can easily assume that other things are going on, So Wyatt is close to my heart. My husband is not like Wyatt in general, like he's not modeled after my husband. But I wanted, it's still sort of like a little love letter to my husband to have that aspect in the story, because he has worked very hard to grapple with this and the self-improvement and the acceptance and the vulnerability that comes with something like that. And I thought that was important to highlight.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think you did a great job of that. And I
Thank
liked
you.
the kind of the progression through Danny's eyes, her first impressions of him, and then how that, changes throughout the book. So yeah, I thought you did a fantastic job about that. And
Thank you.
I think you said you wanted to highlight, you absolutely did. So kudos
Good.
to that. Yeah. All right. So tropes. I feel like everybody loves to hear about what in authors, especially romance authors, favorite tropes are, what tropes are in Love at First Sight, what are some of your favorite tropes, your least favorite tropes. Let's hear about that.
Yes. So what's interesting for me, because this was my first romance novel, and I feel like tropes play a bigger part of romance. And for those who don't know, I know that we have international listeners, so tropes are, a typical setup for a romance novel. For example, like enemies to lovers, where the main couple start out not liking each other, and then throughout the journey they become lovers. So that's one trope. Or it can be opposites attract is another trope. So obviously Love at First Sight is not quite enemies to lovers, because Wyatt has a good eye toward Danny from the beginning, even if we don't really know that. But I wanted that dynamic. So that is definitely something that I'm drawn to, because I think it's such a good setup for rom-com specifically. It's ripe for banter and just funny conversations, snarky comments, that my humor tend toward the sarcastic and snarky. And so that works really well for that. So I really like the enemies to lovers or something in that vicinity, rivals to lovers. I also really like opposites attract. I think this book has been pegged as a grump and sunshine, with Danny being the sunshiny character and Wyatt being the grump. But I think in general, just opposites, people who are opposites and have to kind of learn what makes the other person tick when they don't understand them at all in the beginning. I think that's really interesting. I am a sucker for forbidden love stories. Whatever reason, I just read, it's actually a contemporary romance. It comes out in February. I got an early copy called Behind the Scenes by Amy Catherine Jones. It's the perfect enemies, or not enemies to love, but the perfect forbidden love. And it's kind of like a Bachelor vibes, forbidden love on the set, things like that. And that's catnip for me. I really like that story. I also really like fake relationships, when two people have to pretend that they are in love for whatever reason. So I have some tropes to aspire to in future books, I guess. And I have to kind of try not to just do enemies to lovers, because I tend to veer that way.
Yeah, I'm a sucker for enemies to lovers. Any trope that has that inherent tension baked into it I'm a sucker for it. So all of your favorite tropes, I'm right there with you. And they are more of a, I guess, a thing in romance, and you romance and women's fiction as well. So what's that like, kind of writing into different genres?
Well, I mean, I really enjoy that I get to write both, because for me, sometimes I want, just like as a reader, sometimes I want to read deeper books that are more emotional, that make me cry. And not that romance can't make you cry, but things that make a deeper dive into, the life journey of someone. And other times I want to read something entertaining, and sometimes I want to read something scary. So I think it makes me a better writer that I can write multiple different genres. So before Love at First Bite, I had mostly written women's fiction. And I never thought of those books as writing by tropes. But I do think that there's, I like to write about underdogs, people who have to overcome societal expectations or family expectations, or their own perceptions of themselves in order to grow. Usually my women's fiction do have romance plot lines underlying, but they're not the center focus of the story. So it's a different way to plot. Like, I feel that's the biggest difference for me. If I write a rom-com, I will usually do the romance arc first. I will plot the romance arc, so I know where the couple starts, where they're going to end up, and some of the points along the way that are going to be pivotal in their relationship. Whereas in women's fiction, it's usually the character arc for the main character, who they are in the beginning and who they're going to be at the end. And the relationship is not necessarily a tool to get them there, but more a seasoning, to add something to the story. So I think the plotting process for me is what's the biggest difference between the two. And there's also less humor in women's fiction.
Yeah, I'm always in awe of authors that write in multiple genres or straddle different genres. I bow down to you, juggling the different genre expectations. So that's just, I think it's great.
I mean, it was 2021 was an interesting year, because I worked on the first half of the year, and then because I'm lucky enough to have my first women's fiction book coming out later this year with Read It Up Publishing, a different press. So the second part of the year, I was revising and editing that book. So it was definitely, I had to take a week between the two to refocus and set my brain to a different type of writing, because I was definitely in rom-com mode, and you can't edit a women's fiction story with comedy in mind. That's just not gonna happen. But it was, at the same time, it's fun, because then when you go back to doing rom-com again, it's new, you haven't been in it all the time. So the variety, I think, is really helpful to coming at your stories with fresh eyes.
Yeah, and I'm sure it helps prevent burnout and keep inspiration fresh and everything.
Right.
So who would you say some of your favorite romance authors are?
Well, I love your books. So Lexi actually has, she has her third book coming out, Count Your Lucky Stars, on February 1st. I'm reading it right now, and it's so good. So I recommend that to everyone. I also really like Julia Quinn's historical, the Bridgerton series. And I really like Tessa Dare has a lot of good romance stories. The author who inspired me to try it at all was Sally Thorne. I really liked The Hating Game when that came out, and I read Second First Impressions last year, and I loved that so much. I really like Emily Henry's book, especially People We Meet on Vacation. I think it's so well written. And I feel like all of those books kind of are on a spectrum. They're all romance books, but they are definitely, I think sometimes when readers think about romance, they think about one thing. And I think it's so interesting the more I read in the romance genre, and I'm definitely reading that more now that I'm writing it, it's such a huge spectrum of stories. You go from the light and silly, like Love at First Bite, and you can go to something that's definitely heavier, kind of on the cusp to women's fiction, but that's still where the romance is still the main plot. And I don't know, that's kind of one of the things that I want readers to know the most. I feel like there's a lot of judgment around the romance genre, and if you are of the opinion that romance is one thing, that just means you haven't read enough.
Yeah, I recently saw a tweet. I think a librarian was tweeting and said that like romance is like bread. There are lots of varieties and you're never going to get tired of it. So I thought it was kind of an interesting analogy that there's something out there for everybody.
Yeah, right.
So what have you read recently that you have really loved?
I think I already mentioned them, but like Second First Impressions is probably my favorite read of last year. Mm-hmm. And this year, I mean, I have to admit that last year I was very busy editing for most of the year, and I did not read nearly as much as I normally do. Yeah. But People We Meet on Vacation is probably going to be one of my favorite reads of this year. But I'm a little over halfway through your book, and that is also going to be up there. So, and also the other romance book I mentioned, Behind the Scenes, I think that's going to also make a splash. So actually, now that I think about it, those are all books I've read probably since November, and I've liked all of them. I feel like that's kind of rare. Usually there are books that at this point in my life, there are books I don't finish. I don't know about you.
Short. Life's too short.
Life's too short. But yeah, I've liked all of the books I've read recently. So I don't know if maybe just the quality of books coming out, or I don't know.
You're on a winning streak.
I'm on a winning streak. I hope it stays that way.
Yes, I hope it continues.
Yeah.
We have a lot of Q&As appearing. So before we get to those, what can readers expect from you next?
So next, like I said, my first women's fiction book is coming out later this spring. It's called These Numbered Days. I don't have an exact publication date just yet, but it should be later this spring. And then I have some rom-com projects in the works, so I'm hoping for more of those. Yeah, that's basically it. More books.
Very excited. I'm very excited for everything that you have coming and what is forthcoming. And I think everybody who reads Love at First Bite is going to be dying to read what you have next.
Oh, I hope so. Fingers crossed.
Yes, definitely. Okay, so again, reminder, if you have questions, put them in the Q&A. I'm going to start going through some of those. Okay. I don't know if I should say names or not, but okay, so what's the most annoying thing about the Spite house in your book?
Well, I think it's completely blocking her ex's view. So one of the reasons he wanted to buy this big house was because it has a view of the Puget Sound. And when Danny puts up the house, she first puts up a 12-foot fence. I think it's 12 feet. It's a tall fence. So it blocks the view completely. And I think that has to be the number one thing, because that's the first thing that happens.
Yeah, that would definitely be a nuisance.
Yes.
Okay, so how do people become beta readers for your books?
So beta readers for me I have a very close-knit group of writer friends who are my best friends, and also the best writers, and together we form a group that are kind of, that's where I find my beta readers. So for me, it was important when I first started writing, and when I first started, I don't know if that's what the question is aiming at, how do you find them? I think it's really important especially when you start out as a writer, that you have a writing community. So finding that online or in writer groups, local writer groups in your town, and finding people who are like-minded and maybe roughly at the same stage in their publishing journey as you is really important. I know that in the beginning of my writing journey, I had friends read my books, and that also has value. But as you get further on, you really kind of need other writers who know what to look for. They know the editing process, and they have insight into beats and plot structure and things like that, and can help you with those things. So right now I have my close group of friends that we are each other's beta readers.
Yeah, I completely concur. I think that community is the number one most important aspect for writers, to find the people that you can celebrate with and commiserate with, and you know, also not do it on Twitter, but keep into your group chat.
Yeah.
Okay, so what has been the most exciting thing to happen in your career so far, whether it's talking to readers or seeing your cover for the first time, actually finishing your book, etc.?
I think, there's a lot of things. On my publication day, my husband and I went for a drive to find my book in a bookstore, and we did. And I think seeing it on the shelf in an actual Barnes and Noble, and made it real in a different way that it maybe hadn't been before. But I also really I've had a few readers reach out and just say like how much they enjoyed the book and stuff, and that has also, it makes my day every time. And I really appreciate when readers point out that the mini earstrap in the book, that is something that they liked seeing represented, and that they learned something from it, because that was an important part of the story for me. As much as I wanted to make it a comedic, you know, funny, lighthearted tale, it was also important for me that that was in there. So that has been really exciting to see that resonates with readers.
Yeah, absolutely. I feel like when you're writing, you can get so in your head that then when you get a message from a reader that they connected and you did the thing that you set out to do. Right. That's so special when, you know, it connects with readers, and then
right.
book on a shelf for the first time.
Yeah.
It like makes it all, you know, feel very real. It's magical. Definitely.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, I love this question. So do Danny and Wyatt have celebrity counterparts, actual people you envisioned when you wrote the book? And tell us about your love of moto jackets.
It's Wyatt's love for moto jackets, not my love for moto jackets. But it's, so I'm terrible with names. And so I should probably have written down the names of the actors right now that I envisioned. And yeah.
Wyatt is a Tom Hardy.
Tom Hardy, thank you.
Tom Hardy lookalike.
I always think Tom Brody, and it's not Tom Brody. I'm terrible at names. Yes, so Wyatt is a Tom Hardy lookalike. That's how he's described in the book. So that's that was the inspiration for him. And Danny, I pictured as, she has the lead role in the female wrestling show. What's her name? I can't remember now. I'm sorry. Alison Brie, thank you. Yes, someone came to my rescue. Claire. Alison Brie was who I pictured as Danny.
Love that. I feel like they would definitely have good on-screen chemistry. So
that's what I think.
Yeah, if they, you know, when there's an adaptation.
When they make the movie.
When that happens. That would be fantastic. And yeah, and then about this love of moto jackets.
Yeah, I mean, that was really just, I feel like I probably saw some pictures of Tom Hardy in moto jackets, and I felt like that really worked. So I think that's where that came from.
Okay. And then, okay, so this one I think you already answered.
Yeah.
Inspiration for Wyatt's Meniere's disease. Okay, let's see. And then another Danny and Wyatt in a potential movie version. See, people want to see it. The readers want to.
Right.
Okay, so what would you say your biggest fangirl moment has been meeting another author or otherwise?
Oh, wow. I don't know. I'm not a big fangirl person. And I also don't get out a whole lot. so I don't know that I've had a big fangirl moment.
Yeah. I feel like authors, we're very homebodies, a lot of us.
Yeah. So I'm not really out about and a lot. I mean, there are authors probably that I would be excited to meet. I really like Leanne Moriarty's book. I would really, like to have a chat with Sally Thorne. So that might, but I don't know if I would be fangirling. I would probably just be like, deferential.
Yeah, it would be on the inside,
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Cool and collected externally.
Yeah.
Does your husband read your books?
He does. Slowly. He's laughing. I can hear him. No, he doesn't get a lot of time to read, but he does. And he's always been super supportive of my writing. And he likes to hear me tell stories about my books. And he's also very good at brainstorming them with me. So he is supportive in many ways. Yeah.
I feel like the listening, the brainstorming, that's probably more important in a partner than the actual reading of the book.
Yeah. And I mean, and I don't know that the genres I write are really his cup of tea. That's maybe not the kind of books he would pick up if he had to choose. So, but I do appreciate the brainstorming. And for those who don't know, it's actually Brian who came up with the title for the book. So
I love that.
Yeah.
So we know you love to bake. So if you could choose favorite baked goods for Wyatt and Danny, what would they be?
I feel like Danny would be a Danish, like she would something buttery and with like a filling, maybe some strawberries, some cream cheese, something like that. I get the feeling that Wyatt probably doesn't eat a ton of baked goods, but he's been described as a cinnamon roll hero, so I'll go with cinnamon roll for him, I guess. He has a soft inside.
Yes, definitely. I love a good cinnamon roll character and a good cinnamon roll. Both.
Right.
Okay, so it says, I know you guys write things more along the lines of rom-coms than drama sad romances, but do you like to read things like that? Things like It Ends With Us by Colleen Hoover or The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo by Taylor Jenkins Reid?
Yeah, do you want to answer that first? Because I think it's aimed to both of us.
Yeah, sure. I read widely. I don't write very angsty romances, but I definitely love reading a good angsty romance, a good tearjerker, as long as it has that happy ending. I am willing to go through quite a destination, quite a journey to get to that destination. Colleen Hoover, I've read. So I read widely in romance. I feel like my voice lends itself to a slightly lighter, more humorous subgenre, but I read widely.
Yeah, and same for me. I loved the Evelyn Hugo book. I thought that was really well written. It was a really captivating story. And like I said, I read pretty much all different genres. I've read more romance over the past year, and like Lexi, I'm, anything goes. If it's well written, I think that's the main part for me. If it's cleverly written, I love books that kind of delve into personality with very small means. I think that's one of the reasons I really like Sally Thorne's writing. I feel like she's really good at, pinpointing small nuances in a person's, the emotional shifts inside with just like a little turn of phrase. So I typically read whatever my friends are recommending to me. Like that's how I feel like I pick books.
Yeah, with so many books out there, and my TBR is like ginormous.
It's enormous.
On friend recommendations.
Yeah, too. I must have 50 books on my Kindle right now, but I don't know
ridiculous.
when I'm going to get to. Yeah.
So while writing romance, what do you find to be the most challenging part? How do you push through?
For me, it's different with different books. There are books where the plotting becomes hard, where you know where you want to get the characters, but it's hard to find exactly what's going to get them there. So I can sometimes get stuck on that part. In other books, it's infusing enough in the middle of the story. I feel like openings are pretty easy and endings are pretty easy. And then often, we talk about the muddy middle or the murky middle or whatever you want to call it, where things kind of get jumbled and you need to find a clear path through. I think sometimes that can be the tricky part. And I think the way to push through is just doing it. And that sounds maybe stupid, but you have to sit down in front of your computer and stare at your screen and put your fingers on the keys and just do the thing. And so it really helps to have then a writing community. So you can commiserate and you can, you know, they can cheer you on, and because we all go through it. Writing a book is tough work and it's never going to be a pain-free journey. So, but for me, it really varies between the stories where I get stuck. I know I'm going to get stuck somewhere, but then I lean on my friends.
So important to have that group, that community. Okay, so this next question says, who is the author of Behind the Scenes, which you mentioned, and the author is Amy Catherine Jones.
Amy Catherine Jones. It comes out February 17th.
Yes. Okay. All right. So it says, hi, Anna. It's so exciting to see your debut novel, and I'm very much looking forward to reading. I'm in awe that you publish in English, but grew up in Sweden. Could you talk about your writing process related to language? And also, I'm curious to know what ways you think being bilingual positively or uniquely impacts your writing.
Well, it's a really good question, Katie. I wish I had thought about this before you asked it. Well, I think at this point, I've been living in the US for a long time. I was an English teacher in Sweden. So most of my grown-up life has centered around English. And I think that's obviously helped a lot. So I consider myself bilingual at this point. You know, I think and I dream in English now. I probably could not write a book in Swedish. Because you drop words when you don't use it. And I use Swedish maybe, you know, when I talk on the phone with my family and friends and when I go once a year. So I probably couldn't write a full novel in Swedish without really struggling with, is this what the sentence is supposed to sound like? Whereas in English, it's like second nature at this point. I do think it helps to have lived in multiple cultures, because even though the US and Sweden are both Western countries, the culture is very different. And I think it helps perhaps with creating emotional depth in some instances. The way people behave around each other and in society is pretty different between the two countries. I know that I'm a different person now than I was when I lived in Sweden, because of nature and because of society. And, you know, you have influences around you, and America is very different. Also, I lived in Chicago for a while, and you know, the Midwest is really different than the Pacific Northwest. So having lived in multiple different spots where people socialize differently and they use language differently, because you know, the what I call the social lubricants, you know, the pleasantries that we share with the store clerks and people we meet out and about is much more prevalent in the Midwest than it is here, for example. The chit chat is, and that was really something I had to get used to when we first moved from Sweden to Chicago. And so I don't know that being bilingual in itself, it helps me write my books, but I do think that the more experiences you have as a writer, it enriches your writing. So I don't know if that fully answers the question, but that's the best I can do.
Was a fantastic answer. So it looks like we have a few follow-ups to that. So do you have a goal to publish your books in Swedish? Kind of
well, obviously.
Yeah.
But
author.
Yes, of course. Unfortunately, I don't have a whole lot of control over that. And, you know, as much as I would like my books to be published in Sweden, just for the sake of, you know, being able to see them in stores there and having family and friends be able to access them easily, I don't think, you know, I think the reading culture in Sweden is really different from here too. I don't think there's a huge market for rom-coms, for example. I feel like Sweden leans more literary and criminal, police procedural, and not so much chick lit and rom-com and romance. So I don't really see those books being published there. I hope they would, you know, I hope the tides will turn. And it's definitely on my bucket list. But like I said, I don't have much control over that. So I'm going to write what I like to write. And then if Sweden wants to catch up and get them, that would be great.
Speaking of translations, I believe that your book has sold in a few other territories, right?
Yes, it will be out in the Netherlands and in Spain at some point in the future. In Australia, I'm trying to remember. I think those are the ones I remember off the top of my head. I know, I think Melanie is here, my editor. If she has other information that I'm forgetting, feel free to
That's
chime in.
fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah.
Authors have little to no control over translations, but it is definitely
Right.
the dream to be translated in as many territories.
Yeah. Have you been with your books? Have you, what has been the greatest experience for you with having your books published in other languages or seeing them?
My books are published in the Netherlands via Zomer and Kooning Publishing, and I think the greatest thing is being tagged in posts on Instagram and having to click like translate to see the review, and I love that. And then
Yeah.
I have a copy of Written in the Stars. It's called Ellen Darcy over there, and I have these zodiac lists in my book, and so seeing the different zodiac signs.
Oh yeah.
In another language, that's been really interesting to me.
Yeah. I mean, I really can't wait to see it come out in different languages. I think that's going to be really neat.
It's exciting, especially since we one language, so to see them in other languages is always special.
Right.
Okay. Have you ever gotten overwhelmed by the responses of readers?
I wouldn't say overwhelmed, but on release day, I definitely did not expect as much visibility online that I had. And I mean, it just goes to my marketing team and my publicity team, like the fantastic job they did. But I didn't let myself be overwhelmed. I had already decided I wasn't going to spend my day in front of the computer. I wanted to go out, get something to eat. I wanted to see my book out in the wild. So I wouldn't say I got overwhelmed, but it was at the same time, like it felt like a wave of love, kind of, because it felt like it was everywhere that day. And it was amazing to open up my Instagram or my Facebook and everybody being so positive and supportive. It really exceeded my expectations for sure. And also, local people here, people I know from the kids' schools and, acquaintances of acquaintances who would send messages to me on Facebook saying that they had picked up the book for them and their mom and they were reading it. And so the knowledge of having, everyone around you is reading the words that you wrote all of a sudden when it's been a quiet project that you were working on just yourself for a while. That was intense, but in the best of ways.
Yeah, it's kind of that iceberg analogy that, people always
yes.
But there's so much that goes into it underneath the surface that you've been, tireless hours spent writing, and then to have everyone celebrate that's really special.
Yeah, I mean, it was the best day, honestly.
And I'm glad that you took some time to yourself and weren't living on the computer on that.
Yeah.
So I like this question, silly question. How did you come up with the idea of gnomes to be part of the White House?
Good question. I think, I wanted a list of hijinks that they could do to annoy him. And because he was such a stuffy person, actually, the person that I envisioned as Sam is Joseph Gordon-Levitt when we were talking about casting. And I know I had some pushback from my friends when I told them that. But if you see him in the more recent movies, you can totally picture it with a button down and, kind of the smarmy. So grown up, Joseph Gordon-Levitt is Sam for me. And because he was so stuffy, it was pretty easy to picture anything colorful or offbeat or quirky being something that annoyed him, like LARPers or garden gnomes or, flags competing sports teams, because I think we all know people like him who are very kind of set in their ways and not wanting to be seen as quirky in any way, just like they're all business and self-important. And I mean, that was kind of my word for Sam, that he's a self-important kind of guy. So for me, garden gnomes was just such a little fairy tale village thing that, I don't know. I don't know where I first came up with it. Maybe I was surfing annoying neighbor things or something, you know. I did do some searches like that. But it also fit with Iris's story. And I like the idea of her having a whole closet full of them, and like kind of coming up with something that would, you know, lend itself to this revenge plot.
It definitely tied together nicely.
Yeah.
Okay, so I know we're closing in on time, but there's one last question. So what was your first experience with romance novels and how old?
Ooh, good question. I think my first, the first book I got hooked on with romance was The Thornbirds by Colleen McCullough. And I think I found it in my parents' bookcase, and I was maybe, I don't know, 12, 13, 14, something like that. That was like the epic love story, also forbidden love. You know, maybe that's where my penchant for that came from. I'm not sure, because that's like the, yeah,
imprinted on that trope.
Right, exactly, at a very young age. And never looked back. So yeah, that was that. These have been some awesome questions.
They've definitely been awesome questions. Thank you all for putting them into the chat and being so such active participants.
Yes, I'm just popping on to say exactly the same thing. This has been so fun to watch, like how engaged you all have been. This conversation's been so wonderful. So again, like my enormous gratitude to both you, Anna and Alexandria, for coming on and talking today. It's been so fun. And just want to let all of you know too, Third Place Books has copies of Love at First Bite at all 3 of our locations, Lake Forest Park, Ravenna, or Seward Park, or just on our website at thirdplacebooks.com. Thank you again so much for supporting this event with us. And thank you again, Anna and Alexandria. And
yeah, thanks for hosting, and thanks for showing up, everyone.
Yeah. Have a good afternoon, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Sounds good.
Bye.
Bye.